Welcome to the Grinders Table, the podcast where we sit with C-suite executives and founders who are taking their industry by storm to figure out how you can build an exceptional career and business. Together, we'll try to uncover how they are both defying the odds and what you can learn from their experience. Today's guest spent a decade explaining finance to Nigerians before realizing that education alone would not solve the problem. Inspired by an elderly lottery agent from his childhood who fell into poverty, he's now building a pension system for 80% of Nigerians that the traditional institutions typically will ignore. And you know what his contrarian bet is? That retirement planning, not payments, not loans, is what Africa's informal sector needs the most. Before I go on waxing lyrical about our guest today, I'd actually let Tunji introduce himself. So Tunji, introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone. I have never really heard myself described this way, and have a bit of full understanding of what the other person is saying. Usually, I'm always thinking, are they describing somebody else? But I have realized that I am that crazy. So my name is Tunji Andrews. I'm an economist. I also lead a team at Awabah. Awabah, we provide benefits for gig workers and employers all across the African continent, hopefully. I did a bit of a stint in the media, like you said, spreading the gospel of financial inclusion, and finally found that we needed to do more. And now we're building our bar to be able to make sure that everybody has a sustainable future, basically, on the African continent.
I'd like to go, at the origin stories, right? Honestly, not many of us that grew up on the continent grew up with what I would call financial literate parents. They winged it
Yeah.
and they did their best. So what made you decide that financial literacy is something I need to focus on? Was it influenced by your parents? Was it influenced by your environment while you were growing up? Or you saw something, you researched and it just snapped?
So I think, let me put it this way. Sometime around 2009, I had one of the very first lectures on the concept of financial inclusion. And God knows it felt like I'd discovered fire. I was so excited by the knowledge of it because prior to then, I'd always been burdened by the large, widespread poverty on the African continent. And this conversation, which said, if more people had bank accounts, the banks will have more money to be able to lend to more people, and then businesses will be able to grow, and then that will create a multiplier effect and boom the African economy, seemed like the thing that I was always waiting to hear all my life. And that is really what spurred me, because I came, when you discover something and you realize not everybody else understands it, you run into the marketplace and try to shout, guys, I've just discovered something. And the more I screamed, the more I realized that people just didn't understand, financial conversations. It was very complex. And the good thing was that at this time I was already an analyst, and the terminologies we used in analyst world were the problem. So you hear people say things like year on year, and you hear people say things like GDP, the EBITDA. All those things really do not mean anything to the man on the street. And my job for the better part of that time was just explaining all of these things in the language people would understand, but with the larger goal of hoping that the African continent, starting with Nigeria, will be fully financially included and, really lift us out of poverty. I was supported efforts by the CBN very early on during cashless Lagos, cashless Nigeria, worked with a few financial institutions, banks, just to push, a lot of times. I remember one of the CBN directors asking me at one point, he was like, "So Tunji, what do you want?" And I was like, what do I want? I don't understand this question. Because he felt nobody would be this passionate about something if he didn't have an ulterior motive. And I was like, I just want people to know. And really, my thought was an enlightened self-interest. If more people were better off, it would serve all of us collectively.
You bring up an interesting conversation. So, and I think that this is very relevant for founders and people building companies and just living, honestly. So, you talked about people using really big terminologies to explain things. But when you build a business or you build a product, you're stuck between
Mm.
using terminologies that make you look like you know what you're saying as against what they actually truly understand.
Absolutely.
And for someone that's, been a founder one and also been in the media, how do you manage that balance?
I'd say this. I'd, I'd be very clear about a few things. I realized one of the major things that, happens in startup world, or at least in business world as a whole, is the ability, when we hear something being said in the Western world, which is very similar to how I heard financial inclusion. We see it makes sense and we want to copy and paste on the African continent. So, more developed countries, you would say some of these financial jargons and, they're institutions that are designed to just explain it to people. The African continent is not so much like that. So see that we miss out context and nuance a lot of the times when we do that. So, for instance, pensions, which is probably one of the most difficult products to sell on the African continent because you have a living, breathing competition in the fact that every African family has six, seven, eight children, hoping that one will blow and take care of them in old age. I mean, how could you compete with that? That is part of the family. So you think about it from the perspective of how do you explain it to them? So the first thing you have to start fighting is the word pensions itself. It's so very elitist. It's so very bourgeois. You need to take it down to the level of the person and how they understand it in terms of what it speaks to them. So one of the things we've done, if you look at everything we've spoken about in as at our bar from the beginning, has first of all been in local context. So we try to use a lot of pidgin English, finding the words that translate. So if it is bank, what is the pidgin word for bank? How do the people understand it? What does it translate into? Because it could mean something literally, but what does it actually translate into for the average person on the street? And that is my context. And I saw that a lot on radio when I was trying to explain it to somebody. So imagine, so this happened a lot. I used to be the agony aunt on radio, and people would call and say, Tunji, my bank did this, and da, 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 da," and I'll try to explain what the person should do. And I realized that in the middle of explaining, I had to explain words. I had to break down, okay, when you get there, fill a KYC form. And then the person was like, "But what is KYC?" And I'm like, oh, okay, 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 okay. Just fill a form. It is know your customer, So those kinds of things are nuanced on the African continent. And I realized that, except of course, what you're selling is for the middle and the higher income classes. If you're selling something for the masses and you're not able to break down the terminology, you would be fighting yourself from the beginning. And, really that's what we've been able to do from at our bar is just break it down in such grammar. Even the name Awabah, it's colloquial for our money. It's AWA is if you pronounce it as an African, it's the English version is the OUR. Then ba is Port Harcourt English for money. So it's our money, basically. So we've always been that way in the way we lead the business and just try to make things as simple as possible.
Okay, this is actually good insight because I actually didn't see where the name came from. This is the first time it's actually making sense to me. But again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to plan long term.
Mm.
And in a market where everybody is not built to
For
actually plan long term,
yeah.
we live day to day. How then do you sell these kind of products? Because I think this is a very relevant question to anybody building on the
Yeah.
continent. Especially if you're either thinking of mass market products but are more long term in value. How do you then sell that to the customers to for them to see the value?
So the thing is, we realize quickly, and I mean, I'm always hoping that more people will do what I'm doing on the African continent. So please listen if you're ever thinking of doing pensions or anything related to what I'm doing. So the first thing you have to do is proper segmentation and messaging to fit those segmentations. When we generally talk mass market in Nigeria or Africa, we tend to lump everybody up together. So we say everybody is poor. So we craft the messaging for every person we think is poor. So yes, when you say poor, what do you mean really? Is it the person begging on the streets? Is it the person who lives, is it the person who sells in traffic? Because that's a different level of poor income. Is it the person who has a mom and pop shops? That's a different level of poor income. Is it the person who is an apprentice or an artisan? That's a different level of poor. And you start segmenting all the way upwards to people who are in the markets, the major wholesalers in the market who speak the same type of English with the person who is selling in traffic, but far different levels of income. As a matter of fact, the Mamarisi, who is the wholesaler and the major distributor for noodles in Okeani, for instance, makes more money than me in a day than I make in a month or even a year. You get, she is making huge sums of income, but she's on the educational level of the person who is selling what do you call it? In traffic. So the challenge is her concerns, even though she speaks the same English, are not the same concerns of the person in traffic, right? And they both need it equally. So, what we have been able to learn to do is the proper segmentation. Who are we talking to? So, for instance, when we came into this space, I always believed that we're going to see people save 500, 200, 1,000, 5,000. And trust me, we do see those people. But the largest, by average, the most repeated number that has been saved is 100,000 on our platform. As in individuals saving 100,000 naira. We have people saving 1 million a week. We have people saving 4 million a week, 5 million a week. Now, all these people poor? No. Do they all need micro pensions? Yes, they do. Now, the core context, unfortunately, in Nigeria, it's a one size fits all plan. So you can't really segment. In Ghana, it's slightly different. So the first thing you have to do is to be able to properly segment the customer segments and then drive at them differently. So the poorest of the poor, we have been able to create a sweetener for them. So we bundled it with health insurance, low priced health insurance that makes it a situation whereby they are able to get value today and value tomorrow, which is fantastic for them because they are concerned about the value today. And it sweetens the pot when you tell them there's value tomorrow. So we've been able to do that. So we have a product called Value Bar, which is an all-inclusive bundle where for as little as $2 a month, you can get health insurance, life insurance, accident cover, and micro pensions. That is one side. But as it continues to go upwards, we modify it to the different categories. So I can tell you that the first day I saw a 5 million contribution, I nearly had a heart attack. Now, I mean, we're seeing bigger volumes in terms of what is coming in because we're now doing mandatory, so it's a different conversation. But I was like, did this person make a mistake? I had to reach out to the person's PFA, as in, hey, somebody just made this contribution. Is it a mistake? And then they reach out to the person. The person was like, but you cool say I can save for my future. Because like I said, when we came in, we're expecting 200, 300, and I'm seeing 5 million. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, we have a wide range of customers. So is this wide brush to which we brush the entire African continent really that is a problem? We need to be able to see the individual, see their community. Even the fact that they are in different states means different conversation. They're almost different people in very large context. So when we sell to people in Ibadan, for instance, there's a slight tweak to when we're talking to people in Port Harcourt. There's a slight tweak to when we're talking to people in Kano. They're all Nigerians, but they see this conversation about retirement planning from a different perspective. And I've always thought to myself, if you do not see the individual, you can't sell to them. There's no way you're going to do it. If you do not see the individual and respect the individual as an individual, and when I say individual, I don't mean just one person after another, but in different communities and seeing them as individuals, you won't be able to create a narrative or a marketing campaign that actually speaks to the heart of their pain. And if you can't do that, how would they buy from you? How would they save with you? It doesn't make any sense. So that's what we've really been able to do and has stood us out really. In Nigeria right now, we are the biggest non-pension participant in micro pensions of any metric. Is it sign-ups? Is it remittances? Is it visibility? We are by far the biggest. And this is us, a tiny company playing in the midst of huge and mighty pension fund administrators. So it's just because we've just been able to craft that narrative and that messaging that reaches out to the heart of the people that need to be saved.
You really, really got in depth into some things that I was gonna ask you. So thank you for that. Especially around, crafting messaging
Yeah.
depending on who you're targeting. Talking about messaging, do you ever have plans to scale beyond Nigeria?
Yes, we actually have very active plans for Ghana, Kenya, and Rwanda for many different reasons. Ghana is just my own love for the country. Everybody keeps going, go Kenya first, and I keep saying Ghana first because I mean, I learned almost everything I learned about micro pensions from Ghana, and I just feel a very big, emotional connection with the country. But of course, the business wise place is Kenya. But again, one of the things we've learned with Nigeria, especially with the way Nigeria is such a diverse country with so many different cultures, is that we're already prepared for each market that we're going into. So we need to understand the people in those communities just the same way we had to understand the people in different communities in Nigeria. We do not just create a narrative and then go to meet them and then try to force it down their throat. We try to get to know them. We try to get to, communicate. Sometimes hang around with them for a little while, understand what makes them tick, and then create a narrative that helps us be able to pass the message across as easy as possible. Because you know what? This is what pensions means. And I always try to explain it to people in easy terms. So what pensions means is that, hi, I want you to give me your money. I'll keep it for you for 30 years. And then when in 30 years you can come and collect it from me, I will be here. I promise you. Trust me, bro. You know how difficult that is? So you really have to know what exactly makes them tick, what scares them, what doesn't scare them, what is the biggest thought on their mind on a daily basis, so that when you do reach out to them, it is easy to spread to get the message that you're trying to get across to them as easy as possible.
Let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is building a team and letting them, or even helping them see your vision and also saying it in the language that they
I
understand.
do understand.
How have you been able to do that?
Well, this is one thing that to be honest, I've rolled with the punches. I've gotten better over the years. I have very unique leadership style that, you know, has hurt me in the past and has now become a strength for me. A lot of the people who are the major bone behind the company today, I can't say they all walked into the business. They heard my vision somewhere and they wanted to be a part of it. It's always weird, right? It's people I headhunt that always want to go somewhere else. The ones that, could see the vision, had a similar vision, and came looking are the ones that are building the business with us today. I think one of the things I also want to tell founders is build teams, not families. It was probably one of my biggest mistakes at the beginning. I was trying to build a family. And the problem with families is that your sister doesn't have a KPI. Your sister doesn't have deliverables to be your sister.
Mhm.
Sister end of. So you can't fire your sister if she doesn't deliver. When you're trying to build a family, it becomes very difficult when you have to have the hard conversations. But you can build an all-star team, a team that everybody depends on everybody to be able to succeed. Nobody better, nobody greater, not even me. Everybody's able to be able to, depend on one another to be able to succeed. I think one of the biggest things, especially for the kind of person I am, I know how to do many things. I'm not great at any one single thing apart from suffering. I tell you, I think that's my superpower. I don't even know if people are insulting me anymore when they say Tunji is resilient. I get it, but it's the one thing I know how to do more than most people. But I know how to do many things. And because I can do many things, I can do a bit of accounting, I can do a bit of graphic design, I can do a bit of code, I can do a bit of marketing. So if I see you're not doing it the way I think you should do it, I usually tend to take it over and do it myself. That's always not let my team grow. But I after I had a burnout some time back, I learned to just step back. And amazingly, stepping back to just let people flourish in their own strengths has been a miracle. Just watching from the sidelines has been amazing. I'm like, so my team could do all of this, and I was just in the middle of everything, trying to make sure things are. But it's been amazing to see the teamwork. So I think it's a bit of trusting the right team, trusting the universe also that the right people will find you. Also looking for great people. But I think I've learned that sometimes the best marriages just happen. You don't force them.
You touch on something that many people don't are not always comfortable sharing, right? You have a business, the business is your baby, you struggle to delegate because you want it to grow up a certain way. You want it to,
Yeah.
you want to execute a certain way. But every day is like you're dying because you can't possibly do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And I wish more people are very honest about one, being a founder, because it's the new craze. I'm founder of XYZ. I'm starting a business. Nobody tells you that the reality is it is hard. It is really hard work. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, why exactly did I decide to do this?
So I'll give you a story about my burnout. One of the things that was critical about that period was that I'll wake up in the this thing that we all do when we're sleeping in the middle of the night and your eyes just open a bit, you know, and most times you go back to sleep, right? I realized that immediately I opened my eyes, just half opened my eyes, and I thought I allowed myself think of anything. Adrenaline would just rush through my body and I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. And this carried on for months. And obviously, of course, I had to burn out at some point. But it was when I started learning that, if for some reason I couldn't get up from that bed the next morning, one of two things would happen. It's either the business would pack up or the business would just flourish without me. So why don't I give it the opportunity to flourish? Why am I expecting the worst? Why don't I expect the best? And it's been the best thing that has happened to us.
Do you have a co-founder?
Yes, I do. She's our CTO.
And has that really, again, you sort of mentioned marriage earlier. How's that marriage been in sense that just as marriages have their problems over time, co-founder relationships tend to have their problems. How have you built a system where you both attack the problem and not the person? Because I see that this happens a lot. You forget the problem and start attacking the person.
Attacking the person. So the relationship we've had from day one has been one of Tunji is the guy that suffers, Tina is the person that writes the code. Right? So it's our uniqueness to the business. Her job is to make sure code is running efficiently. So if there's code that is not running efficiently, we know who to hold responsible. And in my area, if there's nothing else working, everything else, at least a lot of things are working, then it's my responsibility. It's helped us to be able to identify where to drop the needs of the business and not overlap in each other's responsibilities. Because I think a lot of the times is that you and I are overseeing marketing, and you and I have forcing on this. It starts to clash on both sides. And that can be a problem, at least in my own team. I don't know about every other person's team because, some teams have been able to find a way around it. But I think one of the things that has helped us to be able to build at least a decent understanding is that you do this, I do that. If I need help on your side, I will call. If you need help on my side, I will call. But, till we need that help, I got this. I got this. And of course, in those periods when I faced my burnout, the issues were really around my bits to the business. I felt I was failing the business on many things. And the biggest part of failing the business I felt at the time was that, we were trying to get out certain products and, we couldn't just get the regulatory approval that we needed. And I had tried everything. And you know the way Nigeria can be, it's very slow until it becomes very fast. And it looked like because we couldn't get it, everything the code has been built, the infrastructure has been built. We can't roll out. If we roll out, we can get into trouble. We're running out of cash. What are we gonna do? And I keep thinking about that. Is this the way we're gonna die? Da, 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 da. And luckily, it's not as if I did anything at the end of the day to make the regulatory approval come. They just happened to do it when they were ready to do it. But it happened long before we died. Thank God for that. But we try to just make sure that we hold our own bits of the business to make sure that it's carried together.
Talking about regulatory approval, I think early last year I was in a session with the former head of the CBK, so it's Central Bank of Kenya. And
Yeah,
one of his grouse, again, we're talking about blockchain, and one of his grouse was that everybody assumes they know it all, and everybody assumes that they decide not to move, that they decide not to make changes.
yeah.
And the flip side to this is he expects that you founders and people should also readily try to educate the regulators, especially in those innovative spaces that they're not used to. But
Yeah.
do you have any advice on how founders can deal with that whole regulatory dance? Because honestly, it's the same problem across the continent where regulators are very slow and then one day they just go turbo, they start implementing and then they start putting the blame on you that you're not doing the work when you're supposed to be doing it. I know you've gone through that whole dance. Is there any advice you can give?
So I've worked with a few. I've worked around a few regulators in the past, so I know how at least Nigerian regulators work. Nigerian regulators want to, and I think it's every regulator across the world. They want to be seen as doing good. They also want to be seen as championing innovation. They also do not want to be competed with, and they want you to go as quickly as you can, as much as you can carry them along. So I'll explain what I mean. When we came into this space, at least micro pensions, the competition were two giants, I think System Specs and Cyberpay, which are very established businesses, who were doing what we were doing at the time. And there was no way we could compete with these guys. Absolutely no way we could compete with these guys. But I had one thing that most people did not or do tend to overlook, at least within the Nigerian context. I don't know how it works in any other country, but I have a high level of political intelligence. And when I say political intelligence, I know how to pander to everybody's best interest. So I know what I'm trying to find out what is it that you are trying to achieve, and I try to help you achieve it. And I go over and beyond to make you know that you can trust me. You can actually rely on me. So a lot of the times with my regulator, we would have been, months and months would have been pursuing something. We would be ready. And regulator will be like, they'll be like, okay, hold on, I'll call, hold on. And then after a while, they'll be like, why have you not rolled out? And I'll be like, you've not told me to roll out. It's like, are you serious? You've been waiting since. You do not do that. Now, if this happens many times, they start to trust the fact that you will follow the rule. And I think it's a lot scary for them, especially with fintech businesses. I don't think they worry so much about traditional businesses doing this. I think the worry is usually with startups that, we try to ask forgiveness, not permission. So I have made my regulators trust me enough that I now have the ability to walk into the office and ask for direction on many things. Right. So if, for instance, okay, there's a new regulator that we are now we're about to go under, who saw our works with another regulator and called us to help create the framework for a new license in Nigeria. Now, in that conversation, it was just the way they saw me very active, and then after that point, I get called, consulted about many things. Oh, Tunji, we're about to do this. What do you think we should do? Tunji, do you think we should do this? Now, the thing with that is that it also helps me know why they are having delays. So they can say, oh, the government, the president is going to sign off this, we're waiting for this to be signed off on that. So I think it's relationship building, really. It's relationship building. We tend to look at them as the other side and not realizing that we're both on the same side. So there was my regulator on the pension side, micro pensions, the head of micro pensions, the previous one. I was talking to him one day and he says, Tunji, I want you to succeed because if you succeed, I succeed. As in that There's no bigger validation from your regulator than that. If you succeed, I succeed. And it's because he was able to see that clearly we're on the same. Every time we wanted to roll out something, I'll send it to him. Sir, what do you think about this? He'll be like, oh, remove this, put this back, tweak this. I want to roll this out. What do you think, sir? He's like, do you think the PFAs won't be too angry with this? Why don't you talk to them? Have a conversation, come back. So we've always been in that level of engagement with the regulator and all the other regulators we've worked with. So in fact, this new one, we've continued to engage with them and on multiple levels. So I do not think that regulation is much a problem as it is the readiness of the startups to engage them. So the person you were talking about was very spot on. They are seeking collaboration and engagement, and we just don't give it. We just do not.
Cool, cool. If any of you have met Tunji, you probably have seen him wearing all white or with a bow tie or with suspenders. What actually informed that dress style?
So there are two things. I'm very I'm very conscious about the way I dress. I'm very conscious about it. And I know that my lifestyle doesn't speak to that because I don't go anywhere. I'm mostly indoors. I'm pretty much introverted in many things. But I like to dress pretty well. And when it's work, when I'm at work, I also like to not put too much emphasis on what I'm wearing while still doing it at the same time. So I decided to go with a dress code that allows me to still be able to do best of both worlds, functionality, and at the same time still be able to speak to my unique dress sense. So I really want to be, I really want to go full nuclear on the way I dress, which I might do sometime in the future. But it's always been something for me that I always like to look good. I always like to particularly stand out when I am in a crowd. I'm not entirely sure where it started from. And I think, people might not know that I used to be a musician in my former life. I was part of a rap group, and maybe there's still some influence from my musical career, but yes, I always like to stand out. I always like to look good. I'm one of the kind of people that would pay attention to the bow tie. So most people know that they are clip bow ties, and they're those ones that you wrap around, that you
Uh-huh.
just put around your neck and clip. I do not wear that anymore. I wear the proper, which you not like the normal ties, just because I pay a little bit more attention to what I do. So yes, I might not be at the levels of the Met Gala yet, but I like to look good. That is one thing.
Maybe we'll see you one day at the Met Gala. Who knows? Who
Can
knows?
never tell. You can never tell.
We'll be rounding up in a bit. But one thing that I've learned and I've seen is really successful people and founders have this maniacal ability to super focus on something.
Oh,
That attention to detail and trying to ensure that it's done a certain way.
yeah.
Now sometimes with that behavior, you then have to clash with a lot of people that do not necessarily see the way you want things to be done.
Yes.
How have you managed that?
There are two things about me. I am not one person who has the ability to multitask. I think I can to a certain level, but my team also knows. If you come to me and I'm typing something and you're talking to me, I probably will be nodding, but they've all come to realize I'm not listening. Right. So I'm that hyper focused person on, what I'm doing. And when I believe in something, I believe in it so deeply that it's very difficult to shake me. So, for instance, micro pensions. Everybody said you could do something else. Why don't you do this? Why don't you? Everybody tried to convince me to do loans, and I said no. We're going to do this. And today is a different story. In clashing, I'm always very open with my team about who I am. They get to know how I also operate. So I would always let everybody speak. I'm not the type to shut anybody up, but they always know I persist with what I believe completely. So I'll continue to persist. So over time, they've come to realize that I'm always seeking greater knowledge than what I have. So, for instance, let's say we're trying to roll out a product and they didn't believe in it. The way to get me to back off isn't to tell me, Tunji, this is not going to work. because that would make me like the most likely make me want to do it more. The way to get me off it is Tunji, remember this particular product, see the way it turned out, and look at what do you think if we did it like this, like this, like this, and we tweaked it like this, and then we did it like this, and leave me with it. I go, I think about it, and that becomes part of my own idea, and I come back to it and I say, okay, now we've decided this is the way we're going. I am not I'm not, I'm very stubborn. I will not deny that. I'm very stubborn, but I'm also very open to new ideas. I'm super open to new ideas. You don't know how, as in, it bothers me how open I am to new ideas, but the ideas need to come with a higher level of wisdom to what I already know. So you can't just argue me with, platitudes without having solid data or some example that, supersedes what I already have in my mind. And when you're able to do that, I might not agree with you immediately, but they know, everybody around me knows. I'll always come back and submit to higher wisdom. That's the way I work.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is some rapid fire questions. Okay. What's one surprising customer behavior you've observed while building Awabah?
Ooh, I think the surprising customer behavior, at least with the product, is the kind of contributions we've been seeing. I did not expect it. I know. Again, I did not expect ever that I would see somebody save 5 million a week into their micro pensions account. Like, for what kind of business? Like, I need to come and work for you because if this is your disposable income to save, then I don't know what I'm doing here.
If you could change one thing about Nigeria, maybe expand it a bit more. Africa's financial system, what would that thing be?
I would flip the way we've created financial institutions and try to do it off the back of what are traditional financial practices with Africa. So, what I mean is, while we're bringing banking to Africa, Africa had banking systems prior to that. While we're bringing money transfer, Africa hadn't, traditional money transfer. So, we needed to build it to be able to get more people involved. The reason why we're struggling is that we're building financial infrastructure with templates of other people that do not actually correlate with the people of the land. And that's what we're trying to fix.
What is one overrated skill for a founder?
Oh my gosh.
Now I'm interested in knowing because you're
Okay, so when I came into doing what I do right now, I heard a lot of Tunji, you don't get it. You don't know how the ability to paint that big picture. And I get that. But I think on the African continent, the big picture comes after you've painted the little picture, where you've been able to hyper focus on solving one market and then it grows into multiple markets. So if you look at the African continent, a lot of businesses have died, not to their own fault, but many of them had grand master plan visions. It did not save them. At the end of the day, if you have customers and boots on the ground, you have a higher chance of succeeding than just having a grand master plan.
survive first and then you can scale. Honestly, that's the truth. And I mean, 2025 is showing people that at least you have to survive and build some really strong brand loyalty before think about taking on the world. But the reverse was the case when there was so much, when the system was flush with money, just
Money.
scale.
Hey, just scale. Hey, but now you you need to survive first.
And with every of my guests, we always end with this question: power, money, fame, and pleasure. I like you to rank them. Which is more important to you, Anna, and which one is the least important to you?
Power, money.
Money, fame, and pleasure.
Pleasure is the most important to me, which is weird because it's the one I get the least. Power, money, fame. Money is pleasure is the most important. Power next. I think power is super important, not generally because of yourself, but because of other people. I believe that the more powerful you are, the more you're able to influence the world to be able to be beneficial for everybody else. Money is slightly after power because it also has the same capabilities to be able to do a lot more for the world. I think we can do a lot of good if we have more money to be able to change people's lives everywhere. And the least important is fame. I don't think it has very much relevance outside the individual. I just think it's the most selfish of the four.
Thank you so much for Tunji. You've all been listening to Tunji Andrews, founder of Awabah. This conversation has been really, really enlightening. I really enjoyed it. And maybe someday we'll get to do another one, maybe
Yes,
live in person.
I would love that. I'd love
Yeah.
that.
Thank you so much, Tunji.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Have a lovely day.
You too.
This has been the Grinders Table podcast, bringing you unfiltered insights from Africa's most compelling founders and business leaders. If you had found value in today's conversations, here's how you can help us amplify these stories. Take 30 seconds to share this episode with someone in your network who's building, investing, or curious about Africa. You'll be amazed at how many life-changing connections start from a single shared conversation. And if you're feeling generous, a quick rating and review goes a long way. It helps more founders and business leaders discover these powerful insights. Until next week, keep grinding.